Multiparadigm Data Science with the Wolfram language. Section 1, the project workflow. We are working on an example data science project looking at the Twitter feed of Wolfram Research and trying to capture some insights from the tweet. We are trying to execute this project by building a workflow in stages. We worked through the first 3 stages where we set up the questions, wrangled the data, and explored it. And now we are at the 4th stage of the workflow, analyze. The analysis stage is really where the multi-paradigm approach becomes so very helpful. We don't have to restrict ourselves to a particular technique associated with a specific kind of data or field of study. The Wolfram language provides a large computational toolset for multi-paradigm data science, and we can pick a few different tools to see which one provides the best answers to our questions. At the beginning of the project, we framed questions of the type how many, what, who, and so on. Now, for each of these questions, we can pick an algorithm or technique that helps to provide a meaningful answer. Let's start out with how many. Comparison charts can help answer questions about the number of tweets. Here is a date histogram from the exploration stage of the workflow showing the number of tweets by year. The code you see here is available in the lecture notebook. We will not go into the details of the code in this particular section because the aim is to get a high-level overview of a project workflow that embraces the multi-paradigm concept. Most of the functionality shown here will be covered in more details in later sections. This chart shows all the tweets ever made by Wolfram Research, but in the same way, we can compare the numbers of tweets on a particular topic with a specific hashtag, for example, hashtag data science. Comparing the 2 histograms, we see that while the total number of tweets went down from 2017 to 2018, the number of tweets on data science went up. And that might be a good thing to report to a team planning a Twitter campaign on data science. In fact, we can compare the number of tweets by month for past 2 years, highlighting for each month the number of tweets tagged with a focus keyword or hashtag. A few things we observe here are the number of tweets. They were comparable at the beginning of the year, but the 2018 numbers went down over the summer months. Also, there was a peak during October of both years, and that makes sense when you remember that that's when Wolfram Technology Conference takes place. The focus hashtag in this example, data science, has been featured steadily every month in more tweets in 2018 compared to the previous year. Here is the total number of tweets made by Wolfram Research and the number of days over which they span, so we can get the average number of tweets per day. During the exploration phase, we saw date histograms that showed the number of tweets by day of the week or hour of the day. But if we wanted a quick snapshot of the hourly numbers by day of week, we would need a comparison chart showing 7 groups of 24 numbers, something like this for the 24 hours in one day, or this for all the 7 days of the week with the days in the rows and the hours in the columns. So this is what the number of tweets from last week look like. Again, the code to create this chart is there in the lecture notebook, and we'll also discuss the associated functionality in more details later on in the course. Here are the number of retweets garnered by tweets published during a specific hour of a day to check if it makes sense to favor a particular time over others when sending out tweets. We see different levels of engagement for tweets made at different hours, but we can't be sure if this was the time or content of the tweet or even some specific user mentioned in the tweet that sparked the engagement. We could try to predict the popularity of the tweet in terms of the number of retweets it gets based on its features. Predictive Analytics, another tool from the multi-paradigm stack, can be helpful here. Supervised machine learning algorithms like linear regression or decision trees could be used to predict the number of retweets given the features of a tweet. As usually required in machine learning, let's split the entire collection of tweets into a training and a test set. We can train a model on the training set to predict the number of retweets for the test set. For features, we can use the text of the tweet after cleaning it up and also the timestamp of the tweet. A feature extractor can convert the timestamps into a numeric vector and the tweet texts into a TF-IDF vector, since term frequency inverse document frequency is a useful feature for text classification. Let's evaluate the model performance, and here we come to face with the unfortunate fact that it's often hard to come up with a good predictor model on the first pass. We can continue to tweak the model parameters, but what's nice about the automated machine learning functions like predict is they give you a good place to start this tweaking. Now, one possible use of this simple model could be to revisit certain tweets. For example, this collection of tweets here at the bottom. These tweets actually had a very few number of retweets, but based on the content of the tweet and timestamp, the model thinks these should have been retweeted many more times. So perhaps we could check them to see if tweaking the timing or hashtags of these tweets could have improved engagement. After working with the numbers, it's time to move on to the what part of the analysis. Basic string pattern matching and counting are simple techniques that can help answer questions like, what are the tweets talking about? What are the hashtags being used? In the exploration stage, we created a word cloud of the hashtags to see what topics were being discussed. And the same word cloud highlighted which hashtags were used most often. Here is a ranking of the hashtags by the number of times they were used. If we are focusing on a specific hashtag, we can see how often it is used in comparison to the others in this list. Here is data science. Are there other hashtags that were used for tweets on the same topic, that is data science? Here are a few examples, and we notice that typos, difference in cases, contractions, etc. create multiple versions of essentially the same hashtag. For tweets to be visible in search results, it would help if the hashtags are consistent, and that seems like an important finding to communicate to the social media team. Let's try another approach to analyzing this data. Cluster analysis can be a very useful tool in data science, whether for exploration or actual analysis itself. Let's try to cluster the tweets from December 2018. We can lay them out in the feature space of the hashtags, but we don't really find distinct clusters here. The tweets with similar hashtags appear close together, but that's pretty much it. Let's try feature space plot one more time, but this time, for each individual word from the tweets, we use a word vector created with the global vector model. No clear clusters emerge yet, but then again, these are words in the tweets. What we want is a clustering of the tweets themselves. And to cluster the tweets, we will need to map each tweet to numbers so that we can calculate the distance between them. And to visualize the tweets in 2D, we would need to go from those numbers to just a pair of numbers that can serve as the XY coordinate of the tweet. Here is the text of the tweet, and here is the feature vector extracted from the text of the tweet. Each word is represented by a word vector of length 50, so we get a 4x50 feature vector for the 4 words in the tweet. This is the feature vector for all the tweets from December 2018. Now, to represent each tweet with a single word vector, we can sum up the vectors of each word so as to provide a sort of word centroid for each tweet. Here are the word centroids for some of the tweets and the text they represent. Dimension reduction can reduce the 50-dimensional word centroid vector to 2 dimensions. So now we have a pair of numbers representing each tweet, and we can create a scatter plot to view them. We can try to find clusters in this data, leaving it to the find clusters function to automatically select the appropriate clustering algorithm. We can specify the number of clusters we want as well as the clustering algorithm. Here are 2 clusters found when all 50 features of the word centroids were used with the help of the k-means clustering algorithm. And this is what each cluster of the tweets seem to be talking about. Can we leverage the inherent grouping of the tweets to automatically assign a certain label to each group of tweets based on their textual features? So for that, classification, another supervised machine learning technique, would be a useful tool. A pre-trained sentiment classifier can quickly label the sentiment for each of last month's tweets. Mostly positive and neutral, It might be more interesting to see if we can classify whether a tweet gets a specific hashtag based on the content of the tweets. So for hashtag data science, here are the tweets that were tagged with this particular hashtag prior to December 2018. They can be our positive samples. Let's also pick out a number of tweets that did not have any mention of data whatsoever in the text. These will be our negative samples. We can now train a classifier which should then be able to predict a label data science or not data science when given the text of a tweet. We could potentially use this classifier to suggest whether a tweet could be tagged as hashtag data science or not. Let's try to use it on last month's tweet. Here are the predicted labels, hashtags, and the text of the tweets. This one seems reasonable. Not sure about this one. Well, at least those predicted data science are worth revisiting to make sure the hashtags are being chosen appropriately. Let's try one more resource from our collection of multi-paradigm data science tools for the analysis stage, graphs. During exploration, we visualized the network of users who were most often mentioned in the Wolfram research tweets, as well as in tweets by other users mentioned by Wolfram. Within these graphs, we can look for communities, that is, groups of users who have more connections within them than with others outside the group. And we can explore these communities for shared interest. We did gloss over the code in this segment because the intention was to exploit the multi-paradigm approach in the analysis stage of building a project workflow. We will move on to the next and final stage of the workflow, communicate. This is where we will discuss different ways to put together our findings so that it best communicates the information according to the needs of the audience.